Hey guys, I'm Tyler, and today we are going to redo our kitchen countertops. This video is sponsored by Wilson Art. Check out wilsonart.com for all your laminate, edging, and adhesive needs. These are completely do-it-yourself laminate countertops. The laminate is a Wilson Art laminate with a crescent edge. The laminate can be got at home centers around you. The crescent edge is not available at home centers. Link in the description below to where you can find different types of edging, which is the stuff that goes on the side of the countertop itself. I used to think a job like this was such an impossible task to take up on your own, but it really wasn't that difficult. You gotta take it one step at a time and don't let it overwhelm you. Let's get started. This is a quick look at the kitchen before we changed the countertops. We had white, we had speckled black and gray, and then we had white tile backsplash that was totally uneven. So the first order of business was to get that backsplash out of there. I kind of figured all along that I would have to remove all of the drywall behind the tile, as I would probably destroy it as I was getting the tile off, and that proved to be true. Basically, I just hammered all the tile to break it into small pieces, used a crowbar to get it out, and a sawzall to cut some of the drywall behind. Once we got the backsplash off, it was time to get the counters off. I wasn't sure how these were actually connected to the cabinets, and once we pulled it off, I found out there was nails going through the substrate into the cabinets themselves, so we just gave them a good yank, and we were able to pull the adhesive and the nails apart and get the counter out of the kitchen. To prepare the counters for the new substrate, there was a few places that had unsupported areas, so I just screwed some 2x4s against the studs of the house themselves using some 2.5-inch screws. And to get the countertops back to the appropriate height, we glued and brad nailed down a 1/2-inch strip of plywood. This went all around the borders of the cabinets and then in between where the cabinets connected to each other. This provides proper support underneath the countertops, which are only made out of 3/4-inch particle board. Once all the cabinets were prepared to accept the new countertops, it was downstairs into the shop where we broke down the 4x8 sheets of 3/4-inch particle board into their appropriate dimensions for the countertop. While we were down there, we cut a bunch of 1-inch strips of the 3/4-inch particle board, and this will connect to the outer diameter of the countertop substrate, and the edging of the countertop will connect to this. We needed a way to connect the two different pieces of countertop, so I glued and brad nailed a piece of particle board underneath the countertop, and this will just act as a support where the two pieces come together, so we can get a little bit of wood glue and some brad nails to hold everything nice and tight. You can see here where I'm going to connect a small strip to one of the pieces of the countertop. Instead of cutting this out of one piece, which is a little bit complicated, it was easier just to cut the one strip on the table saw and then pocket screw and glue this little strip onto the side. Once we got the countertop flipped into place, I took the belt sander and sanded down the seam to make it pretty much invisible. Now is a good time to add all of the strips that you cut to the outer edges of the countertop. I do want to make a note that all of the wood glue that we're using here is a type 2 glue, which means it is waterproof. This edging just adds a little bit more girth to the countertop, and this gives you more glue surface area for the countertop edging. We needed to get a little bit creative to get the edging in place, but yet get on top of the support piece that we glued in place earlier. Lots of helping hands made quick work of this. Once we had the countertops in place, you can see right here we had one area that was tight against the studs of the house. This offset the countertops away from the cabinets a little bit further than the other areas, so we flipped it up and used the belt sander to sand away some of that area. You want to make sure that it is tight against the back if you can, but you don't want the difference from the front of the cabinet to the edge of the counter to be different, otherwise that could be noticeable. And if you do have two different pieces of countertop, now is the time you want to connect them together and make them one permanent piece. Biggest thing when we're setting the sink is we wanted to make sure that the faucet cutout is in line with the cabinets, and then where the faucet's going to stick up by the window handle. It looks pretty good. Made quick work of cutting the hole for the sink using a drill and a jigsaw. And now for the exciting step of adding the laminate. Depending on the design that you choose, the laminate comes in several different sizes, so you will need to check with wilsonart.com and maybe your home center to see what they may have in stock. Now you can buy a super expensive roller to roll out the contact cement, but a regular foam roller works just fine. You need to add the contact cement to both the underside of the laminate and the upper side of the substrate that has already been installed, and you need to let it set up so that it will bond appropriately when you add the two pieces. Make sure you have a perfectly clean surface, otherwise any imperfections can telegraph through the laminate. So this is obviously contact cement that we're using on here, and this is actually a water-based contact cement by Wilsonart, which is super awesome because it doesn't smell at all. We're doing this in the house. It's wintertime here in Michigan, which is why I wanted to go with the water base. It takes a little bit longer to set up and be ready to put down, but this is what it looks like when it's ready to go. A little bit tacky, but dry as it should be to set up. It goes down white like this over here, so you can definitely tell when it's ready to go. Here on this section of counter, we just put that down. You can see over here in some areas, it's already ready to put down. We'll just wait a couple minutes to get that other section. You want to add some thin boards or maybe even an electrical cord underneath the laminate so that the two pieces don't touch together and bond. And I chose to start with the seam, which I figured was the most important part, and worked my way away from there. And as soon as I started pulling out the shims, my brother started rolling it down so that we would get a good bond between the laminate and the substrate. You want to roll the contact cement with about 75 to 80 pounds of pressure to really get it to bond. Definitely pay close attention to the edges. I'm actually going to trim them up right now so we can see right where they are. To flush trim the countertop, use a flush trim router bit with a bearing on the bottom. You might remember that we had a hole for the sink over here, so I used a drill and the flush trim router bit again to cut out that sink opening. Once that was opened back up, it was time to add the sink, so I dropped a bead of silicone and put the new American Standard sink into place. I am super shocked that I actually got it to work with no trips to the hardware store. Sink is in, looking good. We are going with a crescent edging for the edging of our countertops, but there was one spot by the refrigerator that I wanted just a simple straight edging, so I cut that on the table saw and then glued it in place using the same steps as before. And now it is time for the backsplashes. I wanted to put the counter on before the backsplash so that the backsplash would basically sit on top of the counter, giving you a nice area to put a bead of caulk down and get a nice seal. Originally I was thinking I wanted to do this in as few pieces as possible, but I decided to do it in 3 pieces, one under each section of cabinets and one behind the sink. The laminate is 1 piece. Once I got all of those backer boards cut, I took them off and put them on the laminate so that I could get the outline of the cuts that I needed to make. Took me a while to figure out the proper way to do this, but I think this is the best way. Then I had it down in the shop where I had my safe cut rulers and my Izzy track guide with the trim router to cut everything, and this worked out super good. As you can see here, the wife and I are really excited with the results. Then it was back upstairs to screw the Backsplash substrate into place, sand those off so that it wouldn't telegraph out to the Backsplash itself, and then glue it into place using the same steps as the countertop. And now to add the edging. Whether you're using a straight edging or a design that you'll have to get directly from a countertop supplier, you need to make sure you have a nice straight edge. So I used a little bit of sandpaper there to make sure everything was nice and flush. And we want to do clipped corners on here so that there's not a direct 90-degree head banging area for the kids. And I did this using a simple jig and a router with a template bit. Like I mentioned before, we are going with the crescent edging. This is a rounded edging that we think just adds that perfect final touch to the countertop. Now there is a very specific way that this edging needs to go on, and you can see by taking a look at the side profile as to which way it needs to go. With the edging, I found it best to be very patient, taking small cuts with a very high tooth blade. I'm using a 7 1/4 inch blade on my cordless chop saw, and this is like a 220 tooth blade, so you get a nice fine cut on the laminate edging. Again, gentle cuts so that you get a nice perfect joint. To glue the edging on, you want to make sure you use a Type 2 glue, which is a waterproof glue. I am using Titebond 3, but Wilson Art also supplies their own types of Type 2 glue. You want to glue it in place and make sure you have a rag with maybe some Simple Green or some other cleaner to wipe off the excess glue. You do want to make sure that you let a nice bead of glue seep out of the top seam between the edging and the laminate and then clean that off so that gives you a nice waterproof seam. I used packing tape to hold the edging into place, and this provided a nice tight clamp with the spring back built into the packing tape. A quick tip if you want to take off a very fine edge, the best way I found to do this is actually lower the blade of the miter saw, push your piece up against the blade, and then trim off that little bit and you get a perfect fit. Yes, you may have to do that 10 or 15 different times, but like I said, patience is the best way to get the best results. Once the glue is cured and you got the packing tape off of there, use a file and very gentle strokes to ease over the corner between the edging and the countertop, and you can feel when this is right. Just gentle strokes and run your hand along the edge so you know when it's ready. Wilson Art makes colored caulk that is the appropriate color for the countertops that you chose. There's a bunch of numbers down there that you can't read, but on the website you can choose the color that you would like for the appropriate design that you chose. I like to use a caulking trowel. I don't know if everyone likes this, but I get the best results with this. Slow and gentle, and make sure you keep the trowel clean to get that perfect seam. So right now the countertops are not actually pulled down onto the cabinets, and I'm going to use these L brackets. I didn't have these when I put the countertop on. Would have definitely been easier to put these brackets onto the cabinets flush with the top before putting these on, but it's just 2 screws, and you can see right down there how they attach. So it just connects to the frame of the cabinet and then to the countertop itself to pull it down. Here is an overall look at the finished counters. By far my favorite part of the whole thing are the clipped corners. Super glad we went with that style. Overall, the whole thing looks super awesome and we couldn't be more pleased. Well, there you go guys, the countertops are done and we absolutely love them. We think the crescent edging added that extra final touch that made it look super awesome. It actually didn't take me very long to complete this. It was 1 long weekend day and 2 weekend nights I think to completely do the countertops, so not a very big task. Again, we love how they turned out. The new sink from American Standard in there looks awesome. The whole kitchen has received an update just by doing these countertops. Definitely check out wilsonart.com for all your countertop needs. Thanks for sponsoring this video. Please hammer that thumbs up button if you enjoyed it. Please hit that subscribe button right over there if you think I've earned your subscription so you never miss when I upload a new video. I'm DIY Tyler, and you guys have a good one.